there's a moment, a quiet, almost invisible moment, where you realize something isn't right. Not because they said something terrible, not because something dramatic happened, but because deep down, you feel it. A subtle shift, a strange discomfort, a feeling you can't explain, but can't ignore. And instead of listening to it, you silence it. You tell yourself, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I just need to be more patient. Maybe love is supposed to be hard. So you stay. You invest more time, more energy, more emotion, hoping that one day, everything will just click. But here's the truth most people learn too late. When something is wrong in the beginning, it rarely becomes right later. In fact, it usually gets worse. Because the early signs, the small red flags you ignore, don't disappear. They grow. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. This video isn't just about relationships. It's about self-respect, awareness, and having the courage to walk away from something you desperately wanted to work. Because sometimes, the person you're holding on to is the very person you need to let go of. Sign 1. You feel anxious more than you feel at peace. Expanded deep dive. Let's start with one of the most overlooked signs. Anxiety. Not the obvious kind. Not panic attacks or extreme stress, but the subtle, constant kind. The kind that shows up when you're waiting for their reply. You check your phone again and again and again. Minutes feel like hours, and your mind starts racing. Did I say something wrong? Why are they online but not replying? Are they losing interest? That feeling right there, that's not love. That's emotional instability. Love, real love, doesn't make you feel like you're walking on a tightrope. It doesn't make you question your worth every day. It doesn't make you feel like you're one mistake away from losing everything. But when you're with the wrong person, everything feels uncertain. Their energy is inconsistent. Their attention is unpredictable. One day they make you feel special. The next day, you feel invisible. And that inconsistency becomes addictive. Because your brain starts chasing the high of when they finally give you attention again. It's not love. It's emotional dependency. And here's the dangerous part. You start confusing anxiety with passion. You think, if I care this much, it must be real. But intensity doesn't equal compatibility. Just because something feels strong doesn't mean it's right. The right person doesn't give you emotional whiplash. They don't make you feel secure one day and uncertain the next. They bring stability, calm, clarity. When you're with the right person, your mind is quiet. Not because you don't care, but because you don't have to worry. Sign 2. You keep convincing yourself they're the one. This one is subtle, but powerful. Pay attention to your thoughts. Do you find yourself constantly justifying their behavior? Saying things like, they're just going through a lot right now. They didn't mean it like that. They'll change once things settle down. You're not seeing reality. You're rewriting it. When someone is truly right for you, you don't have to build a case for them in your own mind. You don't sit there trying to prove to yourself why they're good for you. Because it's obvious. It's felt. It's consistent. But when someone is wrong for you, you become their defense lawyer, explaining their absence, excusing their disrespect, minimizing your own pain. Why? Because accepting the truth would mean letting them go. And that's the part you're not ready for. So instead, you choose comfort over clarity. You hold on to potential instead of reality. You fall in love with who they could be instead of who they actually are. And that's where most people get stuck. Because potential is powerful. It gives you hope. It keeps you invested. But here's the truth. Potential is not a promise. And you can't build a real relationship on maybe. Sign 3. They invalidate your feelings. Deep emotional breakdown. You try to open up. You try to communicate. You try to be honest about how you feel. And somehow, it always turns against you. They say things like, you're overreacting. It's not that serious. You're too emotional. And slowly, you start questioning yourself. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I am making it a big deal. So you start shrinking, holding things in, staying quiet, avoiding conflict. Not because everything is okay, but because expressing yourself feels pointless. This is one of the most damaging dynamics in a relationship. Because it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It changes how you see yourself. You stop trusting your emotions. You stop believing your experiences. You disconnect from your own voice. And the worst part? You begin to accept less than you deserve, just to keep the peace. But let's be clear. The right person will never punish you for being honest. They won't dismiss your feelings. They won't make you feel stupid for caring. They'll listen, even if they don't fully understand. They'll try. Because respect isn't about always agreeing. It's about always acknowledging. Sign 4. You're the only one putting in real effort. Relationships require effort. That's normal. But effort should be mutual, balanced, reciprocated. If you're always the one initiating conversations, making plans, fixing problems, then you're not in a relationship. You're carrying one. And carrying a relationship alone is exhausting. At first, you don't mind. You tell yourself, I just care more. I'm just more expressive. But over time, it starts to hurt. Because deep down, you know something is missing. You start asking yourself, if I stop trying, would they even notice? And that question is everything. Because the answer reveals the truth. Real love meets you halfway. It doesn't leave you doing all the work. If any of these signs feel familiar, don't ignore that. Because what we're about to get into next are the signs that people ignore the most and regret the deepest. Sign 5. Your values don't align. Expanded. Attraction can bring two people together, but values determine whether they stay together. You might love their personality, enjoy their presence, feel a strong connection, but if your core values don't match, that relationship will slowly break. Because values shape everything. How you handle conflict, how you view loyalty, how you approach life. If you value growth, and they avoid it. If you value honesty, and they hide things. If you want commitment, and they want freedom, you're not building a future. You're delaying an ending. Sign 6. You feel emotionally drained after being with them. Energy doesn't lie. After spending time with them, how do you feel? Do you feel lighter? Happier? More at peace? Or do you feel tired? Drained? Mentally exhausted? The wrong person will slowly deplete you. Not all at once, but over time. Through stress, through confusion, through emotional inconsistency. And you won't even realize it at first. Until one day, you feel completely empty. Most people don't leave when they see the first red flag, or the second, or even the fifth. They stay until the damage is done, until they lose themselves, until walking away feels impossible. But you don't have to be one of them, because awareness changes everything. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is the one your heart already knows. Before we continue, take a second and ask yourself this. How many times have you ignored a red flag just because you didn't want to lose them? Not because it felt right, not because it made sense, but because the idea of losing them felt worse than the reality of staying. That's where most people get trapped, not in love, but in attachment. And what we're about to go into next, these are the signs that don't just affect your relationship. They slowly destroy you. Sign 7. They only show up when it's convenient for them. Deep dive. Pay attention to patterns. Not words, not promises. Patterns. Because anyone can say, I care about you. But not everyone can prove it consistently. The wrong person will come into your life like a wave. They show up strong, give you attention, make you feel important. And just when you start getting comfortable, they disappear. No explanation, no consistency, no accountability. And then they come back, like nothing happened, acting normal, acting sweet, acting like you should just accept it. And the hardest part? You do, because you miss them, because you got used to them, because a part of you is just happy they're back. But this creates a dangerous cycle. They give you just enough to keep you from leaving, but never enough to make you feel secure. That's not love, that's control. Because when someone only shows up when it's convenient, they're not choosing you, they're choosing access to you. And there's a difference. The right person doesn't disappear and reappear. They remain consistent, present, reliable. Because real love isn't about being there when it's easy. It's about being there. Period. Sign 8. You ignore red flags because you're afraid to lose them. This one cuts deep. Because it's not just about them. It's about you. You see the signs. You notice the disrespect, the inconsistency, the lack of effort. But instead of walking away, you stay. Why? Because losing them feels unbearable. So you start negotiating with your own standards. You tell yourself, it's not that bad. I've seen worse. At least they care a little. And just like that, you begin lowering your expectations, accepting things you once said you never would, ignoring things that once would have been deal breakers. And here's the painful truth. Every time you ignore a red flag, you send a message, not just to them, but to yourself. You say, my needs don't matter. My boundaries aren't important. I'll accept whatever I can get. And over time, that becomes your reality. Because people don't treat you how you deserve. They treat you how you allow. Sign 9. You don't feel like yourself anymore. Identity breakdown. This is one of the most dangerous signs because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, quietly. At first, it's small changes. You stop saying certain things to avoid conflict. You hide parts of your personality to keep them comfortable. You adjust your behavior so they won't pull away. And little by little, you start becoming someone else. Not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. You lose your confidence, your voice, your sense of self, until one day, you look at yourself and think, what happened to me? And that's when it hits you. You didn't just fall in love with the wrong person. You lost yourself trying to keep them. But hear this clearly. The right person will never require you to shrink to be loved. They won't make you feel like you need to change who you are just to be accepted. They'll meet you as you are and help you grow, not disappear. Sign 10. Deep down, you know the truth you can't escape. This is the sign people try to ignore the most because it doesn't come from logic. It doesn't come from evidence. It comes from something deeper. Your intuition, that quiet voice that keeps whispering, this isn't right. Even when everything looks okay on the surface, something feels off. And no matter how much you try to silence it, it comes back in your thoughts, in your emotions, in your gut. Because your intuition sees what your heart refuses to accept. It notices the inconsistency, the lack of alignment, the emotional disconnect, and it tries to protect you. But most people ignore it because listening to it means letting go. And letting go is hard, especially when you've invested time, energy, and emotions. But here's the truth. Ignoring your intuition doesn't make the problem disappear. It just delays the pain and usually makes it worse. Let's pause for a moment. Think about your relationship or the last one you couldn't let go of. Be honest with yourself. Not what you wanted it to be, not what you hoped it would become, but what it actually is. How it makes you feel, how it affects your peace, how it changes who you are. Because clarity doesn't come from ignoring reality. It comes from facing it. And sometimes, the most painful realization is this. You weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. Bonus sign. You're addicted to the idea of them, not the reality. This is where many people get stuck for years. You don't love who they are. You love who you imagine they could be. You replay the good moments, the sweet words, the rare times they showed up, and you build a version of them in your mind that doesn't actually exist consistently. So you stay, holding on to memories, instead of reality, fighting for potential, instead of accepting truth. But potential is dangerous because it keeps you emotionally invested in something that may never happen. At some point, you have to stop asking, how can I make this work? And start asking, is this even right for me? Because love isn't supposed to feel like constant confusion. It's not supposed to feel like anxiety, or uncertainty, or emotional exhaustion. Real love feels safe. Not perfect, not easy all the time, but stable, respectful, consistent. And if you're not experiencing that, you're not losing love by walking away. You're making space for the right one. Sometimes the person you can't let go of is the person you need to let go of the most.